Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Egen Shir Torah. We'd like to welcome everyone to today's shiur from Rabbi Yakov Zev Smith Shlita and the halachas of Stam Yaynom. When does it apply? We would like to have the great schus of sponsoring a shiur called Egen Shir Torah at 718-851-8651.
Someone asked recently, he got a very expensive bottle of wine, a goyish bottle of wine from a non-Jewish acquaintance, and he wanted to know if he'd give it away to someone else. And now is the season of giving gifts. Can he give this wine that's not kosher to another guy that he owes and he's beholden to, and he has to give him a gift? He heard episodes in Issa Hana from Yayin Nesech. Then we heard a shayla where someone had a cleaning lady in the house that cleaned out the refrigerator, took out the bottle of wine or grape juice, took it out, put it back. Did that make the wine or the grape juice Yayin Nesech? In Yeshiva we heard this question. The Bacha who's in charge of the wine keeps the wine in his closet, and the guy cleaned up the dorm room. He was in the room alone with the wine. Does that affect the wine at all? And these questions come up in different scenarios. In a kiddush, and the guy carried the box of wine, all the different open bottles of wine from the shul to the car. Does it make it Yayin Nesech? By a simcha, there are waiters. And the truth is, as we'll see, and as we do see in practice, the questions of Yayin Nesech come up at home, in a shul, by a simcha, in a yeshiva. And I think I could say it's probably the most misunderstood halacha of all the halachas that we ever learned. Almost all the times people are machmir when there really is no reason to be machmir. You'll say, so what's wrong? So Dr. Darki Moshe and Kuf Chav Dal Tzivkat and Ches, and the Shach quotes him, throwing out wine that's really kosher is Bal Tashchis. It's Mam and Yisrael. So I wanted today, Bez Hashem, to learn the sugya, to know when does this apply, when doesn't it apply. So the truth is, we could probably spend a half a share just going through the severity, the chaymer, the unusual chaymer of the issa of Yayin Nesech. I mean, there's a lot to say about that in halacha, in just the fact that the Rivash in Reish Nun Hey, one of the Rishonim, discusses someone that's ill, could be even deathly ill. He's not allowed to use Yayin Nesech to heal himself. It's not from the Gimel Chamurais. How could it be that a person's Pikuach Nefesh is not Doiche Yayin Nesech? The teretz is that since, as we'll see, Yayin Nesech is a form of Avodah Zarah, could be, we'll say it's an Avizraya of Avodah Zarah, and Yarek Val Yaver. Okay, we don't paskin that way, and even the Rivash is not certain about that. But definitely, when we hear today, there are certain medicines, especially alternative medicines, that have some Yayin Nesech in it, and if it's Chayla She'ein by Sakana, then certainly we can't be Mekel. The Shulchan Aruch in Kuf Yud Ches Sif Hey says regarding these type of Yisurim, even Te'ima, even a taste of Yayin Nesech, we'll soon see a very common example of that, but even Te'ima of Yayin Nesech is also. The Ramah in Kuf Chav Gimel, Sif Chavav, says if someone was nichshel b'shoigig in Stam Yaynom, he should fast 5 days. Of course, not consecutively, but 5 days as a shoigig of Stam Yaynom. The Chidah in Shirei Bracha Kuf Chav Gimel Beis tells a Maisa Pella Moed, or the Chaim Vatal, says he once went to his Rebbe the Arizal, and the Rebbe says, on your forehead I see that you were nichshel in Yayin Nesech. Chaim Vatal was shocked. He was nichshel. So the Arizal explained, you sat and drank wine with a Yid, that Nebuch at one point was a mumma, was when did Avodah Zarah, and he did tshuva, but it wasn't a tshuva shleima. So I advise you fast 73 taniyos. So Reb Chaim says, the Shulchan Aruch, it says, 5, what's the 73? He says, but amazed, you have to fast 73. Because Yayin is 70, Yud Yud and Nun, and the 3 letters is 73. So on a trace, Lefi Madrigasai, of drinking with a Yid, that was a mumma. So again, a lot of these things we found, we saw, but basically I think the Nekuda is that this is as a Shaykhs Avodah Zarah. The Chachmas Adam, in the beginning of Ayin Hey, says that even though the Issa of Yayin Nesach might be Kal Be'enei Ha'olam, and Yayin Nesach is an Issa D'Rabbanan, he says, but it's Chama Ma'oid, and it's someone that drinks Stam Yaynom is Oiken Nishmasai Mimakom Shenishosh By B'Kedusha, and Ein Lechelek Olam Haba, and the Mekubalim or Mayrich in the Einish of it. He says there's a whole sefer that's written about the Issa of Stam Yaynom, and a Koyer by Tisma Sarais Roishi, his hair will stand on end from the Chaymer, the Goydla Issa. But I think we know about that, and let's just spend our time today learning the sugya, knowing when yes and when not does this Issa apply. So basically, we always try to find one Inyan, one Yisai that we could somehow use that for all the shaylas. I think here also we could really have to focus on one question. What is the nature of this Issa of Stam Yaynom? We know there are some Isurim that are very chama. Even Negiya is Asa. For the Inyani Kedusha, even Negiya is an Issa Daraisa. Then we have Lamashal Muktzah. Muktzah is not Asa B'Negiya. Muktzah is Asa B'Tiltul, moving Muktzah. Of course, there's an Issa of Estaklus, looking. What is the Issa of Stam Yaynom, Yayin Nesach? Is it Negiya? Is it moving? Is it looking? Some people are makbid, the guy should look at the wine. Is that really Asam Yikadidin? And what really also needs a hezbah, which is really part of the same question, the concept of goyish foods is not foreign to us. We have a ganze sugya of pas akum, we have a sugya of bishal akum, tfilas kelim, toivling a goyish keli. So what's the uniqueness of Yayin Nesach or Stam Yaynom? And also, why are we using two different terms? Yayin Nesach, Stam Yaynom. So basically, the Yisoid really is one Yisoid, that Yayin Nesach has one and only one meaning. Wine that was poured for Avodah Zarah, as a sacrifice for Avodah Zarah. We know by Os Yidin, Lahavdal of Avdalas, there's a very Chosh Avodah, the Nisach Hayai and Nisach Hamayim. And the Goyim, like many other parts of our Yiddishkeit, the Goyim took our Avodah, and they have what's called Nisuch. They pour wine as well. Libation is called Adayim. They pour wine in the Tumah. Now that's Pashit. If a person pours wine for Avodah Zarah, that's what's called Takrevus Avodah Zarah. There's an Issa Deraisa to have a Hana, not only to drink it, but to have Hana from Takrevus Avodah Zarah. I guess an example that we could still relate to, the recent tumult regarding the sheitlach that came from India. What could be wrong with the sheitel? The teretz is that presumably the hair was cut for Avodah Zarah, and that would be a takrevus Avodah Zarah. It was sacrificed for Avodah Zarah. Yayin Nesach in the past tense means poured. Zok the Ramban, Machalas Asuras Yud Aleph Aleph, wine that was poured for Avodah Zarah. Even if you drink a kolshu, there's malchus. B'cheina oichel kolshut mit the krayvas avodah zarah. So the Rambam is really grouping Yayin Nesach with other takrayvas avodah zarah. Okay, there's a little of an issue in the Rishonim, because the Gemara of Avodah Zarah, Daf Chav Tesam at Beis, learns from a pasuk in Parshas Azinu that Yayin Nesach is also bahana. So the question is, if it's a standard takrayvas avodah zarah, why do you need a separate pasuk? So again, that could also be a sugya, but we have an agenda. Lamaisa all seem to agree that Yayin Nesach is Nissa Deraisa, whether it's part of Takrayvas, whether it's a Nayadin, but Yayin Nesach, poured for Avodah Zarah, is definitely a Nissa Deraisa. Okay, that's all Pashit, but the question is, what does it have to do with me and you? When I get a gift that was manufactured by a guy, I have no reason to believe that he poured it for Avodah Zarah. If my cleaning lady moved a bottle of wine, I don't think she poured it for Avodah Zarah. So this indeed is not Yayin Nesach. This is what's called, the Gemara in Daf Lamed Aleph and Avodah Zarah refers to as Stam Yaynom. What does Stam Yaynom mean? And if it's not Takrayvus, why is it Asa? So just think about it. What is the one word that Chazal used to describe a guy? Akum. Akum is a Rashi Tevis, Oived Kachavim Mazalos. The guy in those days were very devoted, very aduk to Avodah Zarah. So much so that the guy's description, his essence was Avodah Zarah. Therefore, Zok the Gemara, it's only logical if you have stam wine, Stam Yaynom, that you didn't see the guy pouring it, but there's good reason to suspect that the guy did pour it. And this is really the Gemara on the top of Lamed Aleph, Stam Yaynom Asa B'Hana, Zok Rashi, Mishum Gzeiras Yayin Nesach. We don't know for sure, but there's good reason to suspect that the guy poured it. According to many Rishonim, that's really Pshat in the Mishnah of Avodah Zarah, Daf Chav Tesa Amud Beis. But again, a lot has been written about exactly the details of this Nekuda. Is it Asa Al Tzveika D'Raisa L'Chumra? But at the end of the day, there's no doubt about it, Yayin Nesach is an Issa D'Raisa, and we assume that Stam Yaynom, that you don't know, is an Issa D'Rabbanan, based on a Chashash of Yayin Nesach. One more point that we have to clarify. You'll learn the Gemara in Shabbos Yud Zayin. It's also in Avodah Zarah Daf Lamed Vav Beis. The Gemara says they acid wine, mishum b'nai seihen, which means that if you drink wine, wine brings a closeness. It might come chalilah to chasnas. You look in history, the b'nai Ismoya, what they did with wine to bring chet. Oh, and this sounds more familiar to us. Pas akum is asa al chasnas. So very good. But the question is, why do you have to have two reasons? And also the Gemara says the maga akum, a guy touches the wine, well, soon as he touches the actual wine, is awesome. Now that doesn't make sense, because if the only issa is b'nai seyem chasnas, the guy touching the wine does not create any connection. And also, we just learned the Gemara, Stam Yaynom is asa b'hana. Not only to drink, you can't have hana. Now we know pasakum, bishulakum is a severe issa, but it's not asa b'hana. So this again could be probably a half a share for itself. But to make a long story short, on a simple level, the reason that Stam Yaynom is asa is b'nai seyem. There's no doubt about it. That is a very necessary gezeirat d'Rabbanan. But the fact that there's a chashash of Avodah Zarah makes it more than the regular issa of achila. In other words, as the Torah in the beginning of our Hilchas Yayin Nesach, Yeridei Kuf Chav Gimel explains, Yayin Nesach mamish is asa b'hana. Chachamim gozru al Stam Yaynom mishum b'nai seyem. The Issa D'Rabbanan of Stam Yaynom, which you don't know is Nesach, is asa al chasnus. But since there's also a concern that it was nisnasach l'Avodah Zarah, there's an additional Issa of Hana. And then the Torah is mavliya b'seich dvarav. And therefore it's asa even b'maga. In other words, there are two reasons. The reason of b'nai seyem would asa it to drink. But the additional concern of Avodah Zarah makes it asa b'hana, unlike pas akum, and also makes it asa b'maga, unlike pas akum. Now this you'll see, this is all in the beginning of Kuf Chav Gimel, Sif Alf and Shulchan Aruch and the Taz. So basically, it's similar to pas akum, but worse than pas akum. Worse in the respect that it has a concern of Avodah Zarah, and therefore it's asa b'hana. Now, we only find one kula, which is really based on a rush, but the Paiskim say this, if you have a suffix, if it even was Stam Yaynom, we'll soon see, whatever case which is Vadayasa, let's say I have a suffix, then you're allowed to be Mekel. Because at the end of the day, Sveika D'Rabbanan L'Kula. Suffix Yayin Nesech Mamish is a suffix D'Raisa. Suffix Stam Yaynom, you could be Mekel. So now let's apply it L'Maisa, and let's see how this simple Yesod gives us a lot of clarity. Let's start with the simple shaila. You have an aggressive non-Jew. He wants to break the Jewish market. You know, Pesach, they have Purim, they drink a lot of wine. He wants to start manufacturing wine. So even if he has all kosher ingredients, if he has goyish workers, of course the wine is asa midrabanan al Stam Yaynom. Let's say he's even more aggressive and he gets all Jewish workers. He only shows up to collect the money. He doesn't touch the wine. Only Yiddish workers and perfectly kosher ingredients, and there's mashgiach tamidi. So then, this is goyish wine that's manufactured by Yidden. So here we'll say zil basa time. Since the Maisa, no goy touched the wine, it's all done by Yidden with an ashgacha, why should it be us? B'yesa bi or b'yesa gishmak. Let's say the same industrious guy decides that he's not going into the wine business, he goes into the pot business. And he makes pots with the same scenario. All Jewish workers, he's just the owner and he collects the money, but he doesn't even show up to the company. Those pots need tefillas kelim. Why? Because regarding tefillas kelim, it's totally in bailas. Mitumas akum l'kedushas Yisrael. But yayin nesech is not a din in bailas. Yayin nesech is a din in chashash of bnei seyin or chastus. So if there was no yad akum that touched the wine, this wine would be mut. I'll give you another contrast which just highlights the point. Someone had chametz and he sold the chametz typically before Pesach. And he realized afterwards that he had some wine that happened to be chametz, whatever the hechatimtz is. After Pesach, is that wine asabano? Because during Pesach it belonged to a guy. So here we'll say the same Yesod. As long as the guy didn't get near it, it didn't go into the house, there wouldn't be an Stam Yaynom. The kalim, if he did sell the kalim to a guy with the chametz, then Paiskim hold he might have to toivel it. Because that belonged to a guy. It's not totally in touching it, it's totally in bailas. So the Rabbanan that do make the Mechira are careful enough to sell the blias in the pots, but not the actual kalim. Someone asked, he had grape juice in the refrigerator, and the goiter moved it, whatever, poured it. So this, although doesn't have the prominence of wine, but since grape juice is yayin l'chol davar, and this Rabbi Shlomo Zalman says in Mechashleim Simon Chafei, but it's really pashut before that. Any grape product from the Amshacha onward is considered already a concern of Stam Yaynom. That's why we'll get to jam, grape, anything that has grape flavor. I'll give you an interesting contemporary example. There's a new, a new Yetzirah on the market. I don't know if it's Yetzirah or not. It's a shtickle of Hatzalah for some, but there's a cigarette substitute, and that's called the e-cigarettes. So, for some people, it's saving them from the more bigger concern. In the yeshiva, we're grappling with a new Yetzirah, a new addiction, But anyhow, so we'll leave the hashkafa for later. But the e-cigarettes are known to have grape flavoring. And that would be a problem of vaping that grape flavor. I am not swallowing it, but this is the mechaba. We mentioned it earlier, that even te'ima of Stam Yaynom is awesome. So now, Lamaisa, they have a hemish ashgacha on the grape flavored. So the Eitzar is having a field day, as you could see. But anyhow, Bekitza, it's something that really affects any food that has a grape flavoring. Of course, if it has a hechsha, that means the mashkiach is focused that it's not Stam Yaynom. So you could have grape jam or grape soda with a reliable hechsha. Let's say a person was sitting with a non-Jewish acquaintance, a business acquaintance, and the guy did his homework and he brought the best quality kosher wine, and he pours a cup of wine for his Jewish acquaintance. Or by a simcha, the guy Yishueda pours the wine. So this l'chayr is not yayin nesach. There's no avodah zarah in the vicinity, but this certainly sounds like Stam Yaynom. The guy didn't touch the actual wine. There was no maga of the wine. But this says the Machab in Kuf Chav Hey Aleph, it's also Kuf Chav Dalet Yud Ches, that if the guy poured the wine, it's also to drink that wine, because Lamaisa, that's Kaichai of the guy. So even though he didn't touch it biyadayim, but pouring is Kaichai, and similarly, Asis out Stam Yaynom. The Shulchan Aruch goes a step further. So much so is this asa, not only is the cup of wine that the Yid has asa, but the remaining part in the bottle is also asa. He didn't pour that, and he didn't touch that because it was in the bottle, but that's what's called the nitzuk chiba connection. Since there was a continuous flow that connects the cup to the bottle. So we see that not only touching the wine itself is asa, magi yayin is asa, but pouring is also asa. The big question is, why do I see by simchas they have Goyish Shuwait is pouring the wine? So someone asked Rav Moshe in Chelik Beis Nun Aleph, well, maybe the eitzah is if the guy is wearing gloves, so it's like Negiah de Dava Acha, which we'll soon see some Amekel in certain circumstances. So Rav Moshe rejects that out of hand, and he says that's not true, because the fact that the Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch, discussed Davar Negiah de Dava Acha, and doesn't say Negiah de Chatzitza, which would include gloves, is mashman has to be a Negiah de Dava Acha. The mere fact that he's not touching it with his bare hands, but there's a glove, in no way affects the Issa of Stam Yaynom, and Rabbi Moshe writes emphatically, and Tzarech Limchais B'chol Toikev, you have to stop this wrongdoing. The fact that the waiters are using gloves in no way affects the status of this Issa. But we do see from here that it's not an Issa of Negiah, touching. Of course, touching itself is Asa, but pouring is also Asa. Why is pouring Asa? That's Pashit. Because really the definition of the Issa of Stam Yaynom is Derech Avodah Zarah, in any form. We'll soon see touching the wine, pouring the wine, shaking the wine. But here's a perfect example. The guy is wearing gloves, pouring wine, but the fact that it's a form of Avodah Zarah, so this would make the Issa on the wine. So now we're back to our problem. So what's Taka the Heta if we have by a Simcha non-Jewish waiters pouring the wine? So this is really based on the Gemara and Daf Lamed and Avodah Zarah. Shmuel was sitting with the guy Avleit, and the guy poured wine. So, and Shmuel was drinking it, so the guy obviously knew a halacha too. He goes, hey, what about Yayin Esech? He said, don't worry, before I brought this wine, I cooked it. If Shmuel drank cooked wine, what we call mavushal, Zaktais is obviously, it's mutal lechatchila, or else Shmuel wouldn't have done it. And this is the Shulchan Aruch in Kuf Chav Gimel Gimel, Yayin mavushal shalanu is mutal. The question, of course, is why, just because you gave it a fancy name, mavushal, why is that mutar? But the question is even deeper. Because if there's a concern of chasnus, so what does bishul help? So again, this is a big sug, it could be a share for itself, but on basically, bishul of wine ruins the taste. I once heard from one of the original owners of the founders of Kedem, Mr. Herzog, he says, when someone says, you'll give a cup of wine to a non-Jew, they'll taste it, goes, don't give me this cooked wine. Now, they don't know anything about mavushal or not, but someone who's a connoisseur who appreciates wine could discern the taste is different when it's cooked. So basically, cooked wine affects or ruins the taste of the wine. So based on Rashi and that Gemara, that since Yayin mavushal is an inferior quality, it will not be used for Avodah Zarah. So there's no concern of Nisach when the quality of wine has been affected. Chasnus, the teretz is probably the same thing. If you give a guy an inferior quality of wine, he's not getting mishadach with you. It's such a cheap mechutin gives me this type of wine. I want good wine, he gives me cheap wine, forget it. So there's no chashash chasnus. Okay, some say the whole concept of yayin mavushal is like shchiach, like gazru. Again, there's a lot to talk about it. But basically, yayin mavushal is muta lechatchila midin hagemar. Now, at one point, when they started pasteurizing wine, grape juice has to be pasteurized, but wine also when it's pasteurized. So the question is pasteurization a form of bishul? So Moshe Shita was that once it reached the temperature of 175 degrees, one Shuvi writes 160, but certainly 175, Moshe felt that's considered mavushal, and pasteurization often reaches that temperature, so we could assume that pasteurized wine is considered mavushal. In recent years, they have a new system, it's called flash pasteurization, which really is a gabaldige chochma, because if you pasteurize wine and you cook it, you might affect the quality of the wine. And you don't want to do that. You want to have a better quality wine. Flash pasteurization basically heats the wine or grape juice, whatever it does, to a temperature of 175 degrees, mamish for a very short while, and then there's called flash cooling that is attempts, actually, it's successful in not letting the wine remain hot enough to affect the taste of the wine. So basically, flash pasteurization cooks it to the temperature of 175, which kills the bacteria, but does not allow the heat to affect the quality of the wine. So here we have a big problem. If the heta of Yayin mavushal is based on the quality of the wine being affected, says Abshleim Zalman in Chashleim Siman Chafei and Koivis Tshuves Rabbi Yashiv and Siman Ayin Hey, flash pasteurization does not meet the criterion because it doesn't ruin the quality of the wine. Rav Moshe's assumption was that if it's mavushal is mavushal. In Eretz Yisrael, there are many more machmirim, and that's why you'll see on bottles of wine, it might say the word yayin mefustar. Someone once asked me, he says, I bought a bottle of wine, it says something about yayin mapstor. I said, wait a minute. Mapstor? He goes, well, he misspells it. Mem pei, so far, Vav, Samach Tes Reish. Samach Tes Reish is store, Mapstor is pretty good. The Vav Yeser, but anyhow, but that's yayin mefustar, which means pasteurized. In other words, in Eretz Yisrael, they're more, follow more of Shlomo Zalman and Rabbi Yashiv Sag. So they tell you the fact, and you do what you want. Most people don't know what yayin mefusta means, but anyhow, but it's enough to just, Jewish letters looks kosher enough. But so flash pasteurization is not as pashut as we would like it to be, but definitely yayin mevushal is a heta based on a gemara. And that's why simchas b'derech klal, especially any hashgacha, will insist only having yayin mevushal by an affair. If there are non-Jewish waiters, so that they will not relent on that, you have to have mevushal wine, otherwise there are concerns. Getting back to our typical daily questions, the right definition of the issa is lav dafka, touching, looking, or moving. It's really derech avodah zarah. That's why the following, you'll understand a little better the following question. Let's say the guy merely shook the bottle or shook the cup of wine. He didn't touch the wine, he didn't pour the wine, he shook the wine. So this is based on the Gemara of Avodah Zarah, Daf Nun Tesamid Beis. It's an interesting story. An esrog fell into a barrel of wine, and the guy stuck his hand in to grab out the esrog. So the Gemara says, Rav Ashi was there, said, hold the guy's hand, and don't let him be meshachshir, don't let him move his hand. Zokt Rashi, uleissa bano, and otherwise, if he shakes his hand, he moves the wine, it's going to be asa bano she'ein menaschen ela al yedei shichshach. A very key word. Shichshach means shaking. Shaking is the primary form of avodah zarah. So we see from this, and the Rambam says in Machal Sasuras Yud Beis Aleph, that when the guy touches the wine, I mean touching actually the wine, and meshachshachit, that's a full-fledged issa of yayin nesa. But shaking the wine without touching it is also a form of shichshach that's asa. What Ma'isa Shahaya, I saw this story, the guy, a waiter, an instant waiter, he was cleaning up, and he wanted to see if there's any wine left in the bottle. It wasn't a clear bottle. So he shook the bottle without lifting it. He just shook the bottle, and there was something in it, so he put it down. Shaking without lifting, is that also awesome? So this in Shulchan Aruch Kuf Chav Daled Yud Zayin, the Shulchan Aruch says that if there was an open bottle and he was meshachshachit, even though he didn't lift it up, but shichshach in itself is also without negiah, without touching the wine itself, without lifting it. Okay, the Ramah disagrees, but the point that I think is important to mention, shichshach is the form of nisuch f'avodah zarah. How about the next question? The guy didn't touch the actual wine. He touched the bottle and lifted the bottle. So to us, we would say, well, Lamaisa, what's the problem? And how about the second question? The guy didn't move the bottle, didn't actually lift the bottle, he touched the wine. So touching the wine, we would say, what's the problem? It's not negiah with touching. It is like muktzah, and negiah is mutter. But this is a Shulchan Aruch in two places, Kuf Chav Gimel Aleph and Kuf Chav Daled Yud Aleph, where if the guy touched the wine itself, now terminology here is important. We say touching the wine, we mean touching the bottle. But in halacha, touching the wine means touching the wine. So twice the Shulchan Aruch, and the Gaon says it's kamag mekaymis in the Gemara, when the guy touches the actual wine, the wine is definitely asa, even though he didn't move it. Why? Because again, negiah, maga yayin is asa, that's the real issa. Another example, if the Shulchan Aruch says this in Kuf Chav Daled Yud Aleph, if he touched the wine not with his hands but with his mouth, he drank some wine, so the remaining wine is asa als maga. Why? Because either shichshach or maga touching the wine. Shichshach, that we know is asa. Why is it asa? It's a form of avodah zarah. I heard from a chashuv Talmud Chacham. He told me something which I'm just going to share with you. He said that today we see this. This is an old mini, quote unquote. When you drink a good cup of wine, before you drink it, you shake the cup of wine. So the reason al pinigla, quote unquote, is because part of the enjoyment of drinking is the smell, and when you shake it, you sort of stimulate the smell in the wine. So he said his suspicion is it comes from a pretty unholy source, because a guy had good wine, so he wanted to do a form of ovid, so he shook the wine. Now, I'm not saying that a nice Jewish boy is also to shake the cup of wine because he's not being mashachshechit, but the connection to me was striking. That people do it, for a guy to do it, I can understand where it's coming from. That would be a form of shichshach. Again, I'm not saying that if a yid shakes the wine, you have to suspect him of being a avodah zarah chas v'shalom, but it's just something that we see that shichshach might have found its way into our daily living. Be that as it may, shichshach or negiah are really the main concerns in avodah zarah, in yayin, Stam Yaynom. But one thing l'chayra is l'chayra pashit. Merely touching a bottle of wine shouldn't be a problem. In fact, we find more so that if the guy lifted a sealed bottle of wine, again, terminology is important. Sealed means that it's sealed, either a safety seal or a cork, but it was unopened. An unopened bottle, a sealed bottle of wine, there is no way that it become asa, even if the guy shook it. This is shichshach, but a bottle that's sealed or even closed, we'll soon see, is not derech nisach. So shichshach, which is not a derech nisach in itself, is not asa. So basically, it's clear that a closed bottle is never a problem. The guy moved it, the guy shook it, is never a problem. We'll soon see some amak, but when the guy looked at it, that's a different reason. But basically, a closed bottle could never be a problem. One thing is pashit, and this the Ramah says it, when the guy merely touches the bottle without shaking it, and here's where the Shach and Sifkat and Mem Gimel quotes the Darkei Moshe. People throw out wine that the guy touched. It's a question of mafsidin, Mammon Yisrael, because as long as you didn't shake it or touch the actual wine, it's mutter. We say touch the wine, we think touch the bottle. But touching the bottle, there's no chashash issa whatsoever. The point is that it has to be a derech nisach, and touching a bottle is not at all derech nisach. The question is, when the guy moved the bottle, now that moving might include shichshach. So this is an important concept to clarify. In Kuf Chaf Hey Sif Test, the Mechabas is as follows. Hever goy nod shayayin, the guy moved a bottle or a cup of wine mimakim lemakim, and here it's an uncovered bottle or cup. It was opened already. So he's moving a bottle or a cup of wine that was unopened. So the Shulchan Aruch adds, if he put a covering on top of it, it's not corked, it's not sealed, it was open, and he covers it. If he's holding on to the cover, it's perfectly mutter to drink the wine. Even though the wine is being shook inside as he walks, she'ein derech nisach bekach. And here we see an extremely important yesod. Wine that's covered, like me by closed bottle, like me by sealed bottle. But even if it was opened and it's not closed with the cap, but it's covered, and the guy is holding the cover, and you're not, and as the Shulchan Aruch adds, you're not choishes, he's going to put his finger and touch the wine. A covered bottle of wine or a covered cup of wine is not shaykh the issa of Stam Yaynom. The Shach points out, you're not choishes that he's going to touch the wine, and basically we see a double chiddush. If, even though it's opened, but if right now he's covering it and he's holding on to the cover, there's no problem. Now, Lamaisa, the next word of the Shulchan Aruch is the yid has to be watching the guy that he doesn't uncover it. He could uncover it and drink from it or touch it. But Lamaisa, the yid is watching him and he's carrying it with the cover on top of it. This is mutter. So here we see, again, not only a sealed bottle, not only a closed bottle, which was closed with the cap, but even covered bottle of a cup or bottle of wine, there is no issa. Now, the point of also that we see is if the cup was full, and it's easy for the guy to touch it, you have to be concerned that as well. But this we could say that the issa is derech nisach. That's the correct definition. Derech nisach might be touching, shichshach, but basically a form of nisach is what's us. Now let's go to our original question. You received a bottle of wine, expensive bottle of wine, you could get some mileage, quote unquote, you give it to a Goyish acquaintance and you'll get a nice thank you. Can you give it to a Goyish acquaintance, or is there an issa hana from this bottle of wine? So Pashit, this is a Gemara. This is not less than Stam Yaynom. Stam Yaynom is asabana. Maybe drabana, but it's still asabana. And indeed, the pashtus of Shulchan Aruch, and that's the halacha l'maisa for Svardim, Stam Yaynom, wine that we don't drink, is asabana. Comes again the Ramah in the beginning of Kuf Chav Gimel, beginning of Hilchas Yayin Nesach, and he says a tremendous chiddush, which is not his own chiddush, it's based on the Torah and other Rishonim. Bizman Hazeh, which means the time of the Rishonim and the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, that Goyim are not so into their religion, and even if they are officially religious, it's basically minig avayseyem biyodeyem. Zakti Rishonim, the Torah says this very clearly, that since it's only basically a shallow minig, but it's nothing more than that, it's mutter to have enough from Stam Yaynom. Now you're wondering, wait a second, if they're not doing avodah zarah, manashach, why can I drink it? Teretz is pasha, there's still the issa of chastas. But the Ramah is greatly reducing the issa of Stam Yaynom. It's not asabana because the avodah zarah is not real avodah zarah. The Torah's lashon is goyim bizman hazeh ein regil nasach avodah zarah v'avil inyan nisach keilu einam yoidnim metiv avodah zarah, and it's like a child, and therefore there's only asa b'shtiyah, but it's mutter b'hana. And again, why is it asa b'shtiyah? Because it's not worse than the issa chasnus. According to this, your gift of wine, you could give to another guy. It's mutter b'hana. But the truth is, even the Ramah is not really convinced entirely by this kula. Because like this, l'chayra, I could open a store and sell yayin, Stam Yaynom wine. I can't sell yayin nesach, that's b'hana. But l'chayr, if it's mutter b'hana, why can I sell Stam Yaynom? And yet the Ramah himself says that you're not allowed to sell Stam Yaynom. It's only mutter the makam hefsid. What's the makam hefsid? So the Ramah gives an example. The guy owes you money, and he says, you know what, I'm not paying you, I'm going to give you wine, and I know shavak kesef, just take it, and too bad. Now you have a whole cases of good expensive wine, but it's Stam Yaynom. So that's a makam hefsid if you don't sell it. You're allowed to sell that Stam Yaynom because it's mutter b'hana. So the Ramah's heta is a limited heta. You can't sell Stam Yaynom, but you could have hana. Now, oy bazoi, our case, you got a bottle of wine from a guy that owes you a favor. L'chayra, if you throw it out, that's makam hefsid. So for the Svardim it would be asa, and for the Ramah it would be mutter. The problem is, besides that, the fact that we saw the Ramah is not so excited about his heta, the Taz has a big kasha. Since when do we have the jurisdiction to reduce Isurim? The Issa of Stam Yaynom is an Issa d'Rabbanan. You have to have a minyan achal atira, something comparable to the first bezdin. How could you come along and just reduce the Issa? So the Taz rejects the het of the Ramah. But the Ramah was the Ramah. So therefore, if someone were to ask a shayla, I got an expensive bottle of wine, can I give it to a non-Jewish acquaintance? The answer is, if you're a Sfardi, it's definitely asa. For a Ashkenazi, it would be mutter. This would be a makam hefsid. If he asks, is it lachatchila? We'll have to tell him what the Chachmas Adam says in the beginning of Ayin Hey. He says that Lamaisa, Roi Paiskim say that even Bizman Hazeh, it's asa. The Ramah is mekel, so you could be mekel, but Roi Bal Nefesh lahachme v'yatzliach. The Ramah gives you a bracha, you'll be matzliach. Someone asked him Ram Shik in Yeridei Kuf Nun, a Rav told someone not to use wine that he got as a gift, and a different Rav was surprised. What do you mean? The Ramah's mekel? So the Ram Shik says the Rav really basically said there's a makam to machmi, even to have hana. So let's be clear. Yayin nesach is vadei b'vadei asabano. Stam Yaynom today, if you can't sell, but if you got it as a gift, or other hana is muta, v'ashkenazim, there is a tzad to be machmir. Let's move on, because we're not yet finished. The Shulchan Aruch, as we said, makes no difference regarding Stam Yaynom, because the same is in effect. Then you learn Siman Kuf Chav Dalet Sivav, and the Mechaber says the following: Kol goy she'einu oived alilim, yeinai asa b'shtiya umuta b'hana. Kol goy that doesn't serve avodah zarah, and the Taz is quick to point out, Kagoy Yishmael, like an Arab, they believe in the same Rabbi like we believe in, and they don't believe in Shittuf, it's not avodah zarah. An Arab's wine, you're not allowed to drink, but it's mutter to have hana. Now, question, if Arabs not oived avodah zarah, so why can't I drink their wine? It says Pashat Chasnus. But the question is, wait a minute, what happened to the Issa of Stam Yaynom? The same Mechaber that makes no allowance for the Goyim Bizman Hazeh, why is he all of a sudden Meiko by Yishmaelim? Teretz is very posh, there's a big chilik. Stam Goyim that do avodah zarah, but you say that's a very shallow form of avodah zarah. That the Ramah is Meiko, the Mechaber is not Meiko. But Arabs that were never even avodah zarah, there's no shaykhs to the whole concept of avodah zarah. There's an issa, of course, of chasnus, that's why it's also to drink. So in other words, there are three levels in the goyim that we encounter. Oiver avodah zarah is a regular issa of hana, because of chasnus and avodah zarah. The stam akum, that's the nominal religious guy, that's like the Ramaz Mutta, the Mechab is awesome. But Arabs, everybody agrees, is not avodah zarah. So therefore there's no concern of chashash of nisuch. Now the Ben Ish Chai in Balak Shana Bey's Oishei says what's obvious, an atheist, a guy is not Arab, but an atheist would also be Allah like Ishmaeli. Now you might say, well, an atheist is not a religion. I mean, just people embrace that. But basically, at the end of the day, this is a non-religious guy. L'idach gis, I must mention, today with the influx of immigrants that come from all these foreign countries, which are steeped in avodah zarah, the Haitians and the Indians especially, and the Philippines, they're all into avodah zarah. So now we have more of a concern, even in America. Even if you say the American guy is, many of them are atheists, but the immigrants have made the whole question of Yayin, Stam Yaynom, once again, a very real issue. So basically, the only clear-cut heta is, if you buy, I mean, I'm not saying you should, but if you buy wine made by an Arab with a Hamish Ashgacha, that might be mutter in Hana. Now, if it has Ashgacha, maybe you'll say, as far as the Shtiya, but Shtiya, no one can be matir, don't forget. But in Hana, to sell it, to give it away, that might be okay. Other goyim, so you have to know what their level of religion is. Maybe give them a faher, I don't know how you'll determine that, but basically that's really what it boils down to. Now that we have this extra bit of information, I think we'll be a little more accurate in when we discuss the remaining shaylas. Question, a guy moved wine. So let's go minakal ala kaved. A guy carried a case of sealed wine, no shayla, even a bottle of sealed wine never poses a chashash, even a religious guy who shook the bottle. We once had a shayla, someone bought expensive wine, and he had a goyish waiter, and the waiter knew about Yiddishkeit, so he goes a frumma guy nachtetzu, so he knows the Jews don't open the seals, so the guy opened all the safety seals from his expensive non-mavushal wine. So the truth is, since the wine was still sealed, actually I should say corked, if it was a better wine, and even if not, it was closed, it was never open. So basically we have the same heta. The guy didn't do anything more than moving a closed bottle, and that should be okay. The guy to clean the refrigerator, but the problem was there was wine there from Kiddush last night that I used, and it wasn't mavushal, or grape juice that wasn't mavushal. So here it's an open bottle of wine that was reclosed. But again, the fact that it's closed now, it's not necessarily sealed, it's not corked, but the fact that it's closed, closing does not affect an issa on wine. Well, soon, so if you left the home alone, The guy alone with the wine, that's a different issue. But the fact that they were eating in the house and they moved the wine that was sealed, closed, there's no issue. Don't forget, the Gemara is mate even if it's covered, which is not even closed. But certainly closed, midin Gemara is mutter. I saw Lahiras Nasr and Chayla Gud Samach Beis. The guy put, after a simcha, put the started but closed bottles of wine into the car. There's no shaila. As long as it's closed, kal v'chaymer from a covered bottle of wine. We had the same is in a geya in a shul yeshiva where after the simcha the goya moved the wine. So ideally, if you have a goya shawed, you should have yayin mavushal. But even if it's not mavushal, as long as the bottles are closed, lav dafka sealed, this should not be a problem. Ma'is to shahaya, I heard the story. Someone told me it's a true story. There was a very from a hamish affair, and because they knew it was a Shabbos affair, they decided to splurge and have Yiddish shawedis on the men's side. Because after all, men make kiddush and there's sheva brachas and a lot of wine, and they wanted to use non-mavushal wine to hid for kiddush, so they had Jewish waiters on the men's side. The problem became, because of an oversight, they sent the wine to the other side of the mechitza that had non-Jewish women waiters. So the goiters carried the cups of wine that were not even covered. So here you have from a grace, chumras, they turned out to a major problem. So l'chayra, this is basically the Shulchan Aruch that we learned earlier. If indeed it was a full cup of wine to the top, you have to be chayish the guy touch the wine, and then that would be a real magayayin. But if it wasn't full, it was a half a cup, and they were even watching at all times that the guy didn't touch it. L'chayra, in this case, it would be mutter. There's no chashash. You're not chayish the guy touch the wine. And if there was shichshich, that's a problem. But assuming that they noticed they were just moving it without being meshachshich, it wasn't full, there would be l'chayra a tzad to be mekel. But the truth is, there's more of a tzad to be mekel in certain instances. Let me explain. Because here we come to a very interesting ha'ara, which is negay in some situations. In Kuf Chav Dalid, Chaf Daled, the Shulchan Aruch, Bizman Hazeh, the Goyim Lav, Oiv de Avodah Zarah, Kol Mago Mikra Shaloi Bekavana, L'chein Im Noga B'yayin Aydei Dova Acha. If the guy touched the wine Aydei Dova Acha, it's considered Aydei Dova Acha, and it's Mutter B'Shtiyah. In other words, if you have a guy that's not an Oiv de Avodah Zarah, and he touched Aydei Dova Acha, there's no concern as far as Stam Yaynom is concerned. Al Yedei Dava Acha, we said earlier, is asa by a Oivad Avodah Zarah. But by a non-religious, a non-Oivad Avodah Zarah is mutter. Carrying a cup of wine is a Negiah Yedei Dava Acha. You're not touching the wine itself. Zok the Dagam Rivav and Kuf Chav Dalad Yud Zayin and Kiva Ega there, that even if they shook it when they were going, because when they're walking it shook inevitably, but since they're not Oivdei Avodah Zarah and there's no Negiah, that cup of wine would be mutter. If you know the waiter was an Arab or was an atheist woman, whatever the situation, you know it was not Oivdei Avodah Zarah, that would be Negiah de Dava Acha by a non-Oivdei Avodah Zarah, and it would be mutter b'shtiyah. Now again, I don't know who the waiters were. Generally, it's the cheap labor that are immigrants that come from countries that are again very much into Avodah Zarah. But had this been a situation where it was a non-Oived Avodah Zarah, then there would be a tzad to be mekel, besides the fact that it was not full and you were watching, but this would be Negiah al Yedei Dava Acha. Now again, don't be quick to assume every waiter is not Oived Avodah Zarah. You have to know the Metzias. Someone told me, again, I wasn't there, but someone told me it's a true story. There was a fancy chasana, an upscale hotel, and generally by a chasana, there's a manager under the chuppah. You know, there are 3 Masada Kedushin by a chasana. The Langavai board, the Rav, the manager, and the photographer. The photographer is the most Masada Kedushin. Varai, if the chassan gives a collar ring and he didn't get a picture, you have to do it over again. So obviously there are 3 Masada Kedushin. But generally by our simcha, there's a manager. This was a fancy hotel. They never had, Yiddish simcha, so there was no manager. There was a photographer who was an experienced Masada Kedushin. Grad happened to be a guy, but knew all about it. and he saw things were schlepping. He's worried about tircha de tzibura. So he poured the wine and gave it to the Masada Kedushin. Here, let's start the affair. And here the Masada Kedushin was faced with the challenge of his lifetime. A guy poured him a cup of wine in front of himself, right in front of all the people. And this, of course, was better wine, better hotel, non-mavushal. There's no other wine. What's he going to do? Spill it out? So the question is, what do you do? So what you do is, when you have a simcha with Goy Yeshuvedas, you have mavushal wine. That's what you really do. But here was the person who was on the spot. Now, I don't know the end of the story, but here we come to a similar yesod, believe it or not, and this is based on a Rosh, which is really the same in Avodah Zarah Daled Yud Gimel, that basically pouring is a form of nisach. That's true. But for non-oiver Avodah Zarah, pouring is no more than an igia aydedava acha. So, and the shach in Kuf Chav Dalet Zayin, the shach in the Mechaba Kuf Chav Dalet Zayin, the shach Sifkat Yud Aleph says this yesod, that pouring is a aydedava achar, and if you make the cheshbon dava achar, aydedava achar, by a non-oiver Avodah Zarah, would be mutter. Now the Taz takes strong exception in Kuf Chav Dalet Lamed Beis. Rabbi Yashav and Asher Yish Ches Chafei and Rabbi Yoiman and Yeridea Aleph Yud Aleph say that pouring is also b'shtia. It might be mutter but not b'shtia. But the shach is the shach. Rabbi Kiva Eiga and Kuf Chav Dalet the Chazanish Mem Tes Zayin passing like the shach. So if that photographer would be a non-oiver avodah zarah, an atheist or an Arab, the Rav would be allowed to use the wine. If he's an oiver avodah zarah, the Rav is in big trouble, and we wish him our best. But lamaisa, but again, the point is to have mavushal wine is always the best choice. The biggest problem is when the house, when we leave the goyim alone with wine in the house. Everything else, people are machmir, when really halach is mutter. This is the one case that halacha doesn't seem to be much room to make, and people are unaware of it. We had the shaila at home in the yeshiva, so let's look in Shulchan Aruch based on a Gemara in Kuf Chav Tes, a whole sugya, that if the wine was left with a goy, you have to suspect they did everything. They drank it, poured it, or touched it, but they're certainly drinking it. Drinking it is magiyayin. So if there's a yid around that's yaitz v'nichnes, or there's a yid that's officially home and slipped out and didn't tell the guy, any situation that nitfas kigan, if the guy will be caught, so that would have the status of yaitz v'nichnes, that is not leaving the house with the guy. But the question is, when the guy is home alone and the yid went to work and not coming home for many hours or went on vacation, there's no yaitz v'nichnes, so that would be, the Shulchan Aruch says unequivocally, the ayin is also because of a chashash of Stam Yaynom. So the eitzah is either lock up the wine, you put the wine in a closet, lock it up, or if you have a sealed wine. So the truth is, mitzad hadin, Stam Yaynom means a double seal, chaysim b'sei chaysim. You'll ask, we once learned that for Nissa D'Oraisa you need a double seal. For D'Rabbanan, one seal's enough. Stam Yaynom is only with D'Rabbanan, so why do you have to have a double seal? The teretz is up to Shulchan Aruch, there's all in Kuf Yud Ches, that since there's a chibas nisuch, there's such a involvement, such a devotion for nisuch, you need a double seal. Zok the Taz in Kuf Yud Ches Dalid, and the Shos Yanke passing like this, but Bisman has said that there's no longer chibas nisuch, the whole thing is hocus pocus, Stam Goyim, don't do it any longer, you could be making one seal. But at least you have to have one seal. So one seal or a corked bottle. The problem is if you leave the house alone and there's open bottles of wine. Someone asked me, what's the het? I told him what Rabbi Yasha the het is. Someone asked him, what's the het? So the Vezok's the het of alles ding? Who says it's the het of everything? So I don't know, And even an Arab, an atheist cleaning lady, the Shulchan Aruch says in Kuf Chav Ches Aleph, there's a concern that she might let someone else use it or whatever it is, but she might drink from it. But Lamaisa, it has to be a yaitz v'nichnes. In the yeshiva, someone asked me, he's in charge of the wine, and he left the wine in the closet, and the guy cleaned up the room. So I told him, I said, I'm afraid in yeshiva, dormitory is always a yaitz v'nichnes. Not just the mashkiach, other people also. So if it's yaitz v'nichnes, we have this heta. Somebody asked Rav Vosner Zechariah Levracha, there was an opened bottle, not just open, but there was no cover in it, on the door of the refrigerator, and the guy to open the door of the refrigerator. and moved an open bottle of wine. So that, l'chayra, that would be a real negiah de dava acha, and basically, even if it was open, and koshkin if it was closed or sealed, is mutter. I saw in the Sefer, wonderful Sefer, Yayin Malchus, Amid Reish Samach Tes, a year that a guy were drinking, and again, the best kosher wine, and the guy said, let's make a toast. And they clunked the cups together. Is that considered a guy made shichshach on the Yiddish wine? You think about it, it shook the Yiddish wine. So he says, hopefully that's a negiah de dava acher, and maybe the Yid was holding his cup, so it doesn't have a din of a shichshach. But again, the whole concept of the toasting with the shichshach, we should be doing better things. Question, which I saw Rav Padova in the Cheshev Eifoid, Gimel Ayin was asked by a Rav from Brooklyn who went to London for a chasana, and he said, this Brooklyn Rav said, I see Goyim carrying the wine, what about? You don't believe in Yayin, Stam Yaynom in London? So Rav Padova says, relax, the Goyim were carrying only, at all times it was closed bottles of wine, like me boy if it's sealed but closed, and a guy moves a closed bottle of wine, even if it shakes when he moves it, there is no issa. In a later tshuva in Gimel Kuf Tes, someone, interesting question, he had wine locked up in the part of the basement. He had a guy working on the other part of the basement. But he had to close the main switch, the breaker of the electricity, which was in the place, in that part of the basement where the wine was locked up. So he told the guy, wait, I'm going to get the key, and I'll open it, and you could close the electricity, you could do the work. By the time he came back, the electricity was off. The guy says, don't worry, I know how to get into these places. So the guy opened it on his own and got into the wine part of the closet. So he asked Rav Padova if the wines are sals yayin esach, Stam Yaynom. So he says, no, that's a case of yaitz v'nichnas, and you're coming right back, so therefore you don't have to worry. Plus, he says, there's a yeshiva upstairs, and I guess he also held that there's a yaitz v'nichnas when you have vachim around. The Chalkas Yankiv and Yeredei and the Nalef was asked an interesting question. They were shipping a big barrel of wine, and then you pay taxes based on the alcohol level content. So they had to measure the wine. So he says, even though the guy is getting near the wine, but the Yid is watching, avidatayu tarid, there's no chashash that it became yayin nesach. In Chalkas Yaakov Simon Nun Beis, there's a shayla about an Arab worker, and again he's makel based on the fact that an Arab worker is not a non-oiver avodah zarah. How could we speak about Yayin Nesach without mentioning the obvious kasha? The Gemara says in Megillah Yud Gimel Amud Beis that Haman was the ultimate Baal Lashon Hara, and he told Achashverosh, look how the Jews disrespect you. If a fly falls into the wine, they'll drink it. But if Adoni HaMelech Neigeya B'Koisei Shalechet Mehem, Chayvtei B'Karke Ve'ena Sheiseyu. If you, the king, touch the wine, they won't drink it. Touch the cup of wine. So the question is, what do you mean? It's not true. If Achashverosh touches a cup of wine, what's the issa? So we'll have to learn that he meant to say either he shook it or he put his finger in it. Or maybe Haman was an Amar Tzedakah who said he was a big paisik. Maybe his perception, touching it, like we say, touch the wine. We don't know touching the wine means, we think touching the cup, but it's not true. But whether he touched the wine itself or shook it, that's a problem. And last but not least, I want to at least mention what people asked. I have a minig, I don't want the guy look at the wine. Where is that coming from? What's the makar of this? So basically, looking at the wine, mitzad halacha cannot asa wine. We just learned that even if he shook the bottle, if it's closed, if it's sealed, we just saw there has to be negiah or shichshach, but looking. But paik chazid is a mini kaddish that we don't use wine for kiddush that the guy looked at. So the source of this, the Shla Kaddish in Ois Kuf, Kedushas Achila Kovav, and the Medrash Talpiyos, quote from Rabbeinu Menachem Habab, who was a Rishon, that said if the guy looked at the wine, we have to be chosh that he was oived the wine b'machshava, and therefore the wine is asa. There's no mention in the original source that it's asa for kiddush. It's a concern that the guy thought about by desire, and there was an issa b'machshava. Lamaisa, the minig has become that many are makbid not to use it for kiddush. I imagine, just like we see in the beginning of the Chashabas Reish Mem Beis, the Bialacha quotes a Teres Chaim that wonders why we makbid not to use Yayin Megullah for kiddush. We're not makbid in Gili Bizman Hazeh. So the Teres Chaim says a Dava Nifla that the whole Suda Shabbos simulates the Suda Lasid Lavai, the Yayin Meshuma and the Lev Yosan. So if you have yayin meshuma, it has to be meshuma. We don't leave it gilui. So it could be we're also more makbid in the quality of the wine that a guy shouldn't look at it. But one thing in al pi halacha, it makes sense that if the guy looked at a closed bottle of wine, there shouldn't be a problem even for kiddush, because even if the guy shook the wine, there's not a problem. But lemaisa, people are makbid. But one thing we could say, if you have a friar person that looked at the wine, sometimes they have irreligious relatives, mechutanim, whatever it is, or the Bakar people. I saw the Skver Rebbe, the old Skver Rebbe, Zechayim Levracha, this is in the Chaya Levi, Chelik Beis and Aleph, he says the Skver Rebbe was very makbid at a guy looking at the wine. Once a friar person came to the Tish, so the Chassidim right away took the wine away, that the friar should look at it, because some people treat a Mechal Shabbos like a guy. And the Rebbe says, put it back. We're not makbid by a yid. By a goy, you can be makbid, but not by a yid. The point is, like the Chachmas Adam writes, that if someone is very nizer in it, he'll be zoichet, l'sudos avyasan, and we have to daven not to be nichshel. Let me leave you with a story. I heard this from a brunch of Kedoshim, an enikel of the Klan Rebbe Zayin Gesund. There was one sitting in a waiting room of a doctor's office, and he was learning. And a guy, an African-American was sitting next to him and says, you Jews, I'm so inspired by you. You'll never waste time. I see you sitting here, you're learning, you're studying. I have a Jewish neighbor. He's unbelievable. I watch him every Friday night. He fills up a cup of wine, and he starts shaking, swaying back and forth. Because, hey, when I got wine in my hand, I drink it. But this man, he's shaking back and forth. So this Yid tells us, this Brunch tells me, imagine, this Yid is makbid, he only buys closed cases of wine, and he has a secret admirer that's watching his wine. So you have to be mispal, we should be zeicha to the Sudas Nevyasan. Guten Tag to you all.
Shkoyach, Rabbi Smith. 1 minute, Rabbi, so give me a minute. Today is the first day of Shoyvim. Igenshitter is sponsoring thousands of shiurim for hundreds of thousands of Yidden worldwide in 10 languages. What a big zikr rabbi. The first thing I would like to ask everybody to join, there's over 50 shuls in Barapak itself that are having the shiurim for thousands of people. Please join one of the shiurim. Shainis, there's a luach of Igenshitter gave out in your day, Chelik Beis, and hundreds of thousands of pieces all over the world. You start learning a daf a day of Shulchan Aruch, or the old Shulchan Aruch. Please start a luach. You can take it in the back of a smedish. Rabbi Sai, as you see, Igenshitter is working very hard to bring Klal Yisrael Tahara all over the world. We're talking about thousands of beginners that'll become the first time to learn Taharas Mishpacha amongst the hundreds of thousands that are coming to Chazad Halachas. We need your support to help, to give out literature, to pay for college teachers, to pay for Rabbanim, to go around, to advertise. We need your help to help sponsor Taharosan V'Kedishosna Shel Yisrael. Please, everybody take an envelope, give what you can to sponsor the shiurim. There's a credit card on the bima. If everybody would give a chelik, you have a tremendous chus for yourself, for gute kinder, gute deures. Rabbi Sai chapt zarayin a schus to give $1,000 to sponsor a series of one of the neighborhoods. Be a big schus for you and your mishpacha. Tiskele mitzvah. Reb Chaim Lekashem Marayot HaKadosh Baruch Hu lezakas Yisrael lefikach hirbelem teura mitzvah shenem an rechovas man tzidkoi Yagdol Torah v'yadeh. Kaddish. Amen. No, shh. Rabbi said, please have help sponsoring one of the shiurim. There's a credit card in the bima. You can take also an envelope to give you nidvas lipchem atoiv. Also, the new schedule of the daily shiurim for the upcoming months is on the bima. Tiskra mitzvahs.
Let's go. Okay, whoever sits down nicely there, so you can get something of the kosher.
Okay, the boss is here. The boss is here.
Flash pasteurization. When did they start? What year?
Flash pasteurization forever. It's been around for a very long time.
Let's say the move did
It's
get
not.
a
It's
chance.
not
Flash
new.
pasteurization.
I don't know. I don't know.
Temperature.
Tell me, Rob, it has
low
been 80.
temperature, I think. What?
The 80 the head pasteurization?
Sure, flash pasteurization has existed
So
for a long
Taylor
time.
move took that vicious. Like help us on vicious.
Obviously.
If it's an old thing, I thought
He held his 190.
Flash pasteurization, the other low temperature pasteurization pasteurization of milk is new and cold.
Yeah, 140, 140.
Pasteurization has existed since 50.
Yeah, well, listen. That was more common. Yeah, because all grapes has to be pasteurized. You can't sell it otherwise. The truth is the whole grape juice is not kosher in the first place. I never figured it out. Why grape juice? Why isn't grape juice isn't getting less than the alcohol? Which is more kosher? That's the answer. I was looking at the guy with the guy that says, no, why is it? That's what he does.
Why is grape juice wine?
Yeah, I hold up. What? I thought it was very something.
How did that make it wine? Huh?
Okay. Yeah, very well.
You should make Kiddush of a voice for the wine.
Isn't that the Makar?
Yeah.
I'm sure I think has a different result than what it is. That's a good one.
That's what? So what do you say? Why it's nothing? Why is it what?
The wine itself, not existing.
So why do you have to cover the bottle? Why do you have to cover the bottle in a paper bag?
Looking. Oh, yes, I love this guy. There's a guy coming in there and he didn't mind. You know what? There's a question. You know what the
Ready to come
But besides, when you mention
some are not even and the non-seeds room closed, but the hummus here are in us.
Chanukah can be baked in this.
You say Irish and some have a minute.
I'm not saying what I'm saying.
So what's up?
No, but close it's not. It's not Mavush like the place where.
And you do on top of that. It becomes the grandma told, okay, let's keep this.
First said the Seekum of today's share. The Chaim is available. Mavushal, not L'chol days. Okay.
Okay.
It's Mavushal, but not L'chol days. Let's go.
Just to briefly review what we learned today. Yayin Nesach is a takrivus of Aydazara. Asa, still Asa, no change. Issa Torah of even Hana. That's based on the fact that it was used of Aydazara. Since it was a real Aydazara, there are unusual chayma regarding Yayin Nesach. But Stam Yaynom means wine that we just see wine. We didn't see any service at all. This is the Issa D'Rabbanan based on a Mishnah and a Gemara that Chazal said we have to treat Stam Yaynom as if had it been Yayin Nesach. Since the Akam, the regular guy, was Oived Kecham Azalas, there's a very big chashash that he actually poured the wine or did service with the wine. The Issa Stam Yaynom includes Hana and certainly the Issa of Shtiya. But the breakdown is that the Issa of Shtiya is because of Chasnus. The Issa Hana is because of a Chashash of Aydazara, and since there's a Chashash of Aydazara, even the guy touching the wine, where there's no Chashash Chashnus, but touching the wine is still the Issa of a potential of Aydazara. The guy that made kosher wine, if the workers are Jewish, l'chayr should be mutter. It's not like Tfilas Kalim. That's why if you sell wine to a guy with the chametz, you don't have to worry about the wine. You might have to worry about the Kalim, because the guy owned the Kalim. Tfilas Kalim is totally in Bailus. Yayin is totally in touching or a chashash of nisach. The issa of yayin nesach or stam yaynom includes any grape drink, grape juice, grape products, and we said, as we said, even the te'ima, which would include the flavor of a e-cigarette. A waiter that pours is asa because that's koichai, and even nitzik chiba would asa the remaining part in the bottle. And when a guy pours the wine and there's a concern of stam yaynom, gloves won't help because the het is not the chetzitza might be makel. The issa is not the negia. The issa is avodah zarah. And since pouring is a form of avodah zarah, even though it's aydei dava'acha, a guy pouring wine is koichai, that's asa. The het of yayin mevushel is because there's no chashash of avodah zarah because it's an inferior wine, and there's no chashash of chasus because it's again an inferior quality wine. Today, flash pasteurization, the minika oilam is to be makel because lamaisa it was cooked. Some are still machmer, like those paiskim that say since it didn't affect the quality of the wine, a guy should not be pouring it or handling it. When you have the real issa of stam yaynom or yayin for that matter is either touching the wine with his hands, the actual wine, or shaking shichshich of the wine. A closed bottle could never be asa even if he shook it because it's not derech nisach. Closed means sealed, or certainly if it's corked or both. And even a closed bottle, when it was open and resealed, even though there's no safety seal, that would not be a problem of yayin nesach or stam yaynom. Touching a bottle, there's no shayla. Moving a full cup of wine or a full bottle of wine with chaysha that he might have touched it, moving a half a cup and you watched they didn't make any shichshich is mutter. It's having hano bizman hazeh, the Ramah is makel, not to sell stam yaynom, but to give away as a present, or if you got it as a payment, you're allowed to resell it to recoup your losses, otherwise you would lose that money. But if you got it as a gift, later Ramah, you're allowed to give it to a different guy. For the Sfardim, that would be asa. And the Chachmas Adam gives a bracha v'yatzliach if someone is makbid in this regard. There's a big heta by a non-oiver avodah zarah, whether it's an Arab or an atheist, that the avada his yayin is still asa b'shtia because it's chasnas, but there's no issa of the additional concern of oiver avodah zarah. And basically, that would be very relieving in those situations that the non-oiver avodah zarah moved the wine. For example, if you moved a cup of wine, or some say even if you poured a cup of wine, since it's Negiah Va'acher and he's a renowned atheist or non-oiver avodah zarah, you could assume that there was no issa because it's a Aliyah Va'acher that's a notch lower by a non-oiver avodah zarah. If a goita who might be avodah avodah zarah moves a bottle of wine in the refrigerator and the shelf and it was closed, there's no problem. If a goita that poured wine and is not known to be an atheist, that would be asa b'shtia. You leave the house alone with a guy and it's not yoytz v'nichnas and a yid is not coming home in the near future, that wine is certainly problematic, if not asa mamish. If you lock up the wine or you make a seal or you hide it in a place where they can't find it, that might be an eitzah, but basically leave a house alone with wine, goyim and a wine is a gemara in Shulchan Aruch that should be asa. If you open the door and the wine moved, an open bottle, that's in the Yadid of Acha. A toast with the goy, mitzad halacha, there's no issa yayin nesach. Waiter moving a bottle, again, is okay if people are around. If a guy had access to wine, but a yid was in the area, in the basement, etc., is okay. And basically, looking at wine is a chumrah not to use it for kiddush. Some are makel, some are machmer in all cases, but halacha, if it's a non-from Jew or is a sealed bottle, there shouldn't be an issue if the guy looked at the wine.
Who's that? I'm asking.
There is, Heather?
I'm asking.
I don't think so.
I know these stores of Bar Park don't sell Goyish wine. I don't think so. No?
Shouldn't be.
Good, expensive wine they don't sell?
Made by who? Who said that is not made by Yid? I don't know.
I also don't know.
The Ramah is machmir and the Sfardim is zichas. I don't know.
So a store has no heter according to you to sell
Sealed
sealed bottles of wine.
You know what's the thing? Right? A store selling the Stam Yaynom?
The question is, what degree did they use?
What is action? Action is not trying to find.
No, I'm saying you wasn't actually using the vessel. You buy the vessel wine. Let's say that.
It's a chomer nekul, you know that.
Okay.
So he would use Marisha wine.
No.
The kids.
There's wines. We haven't made the ethnic advisors with these France
Yeah.
places. So you have to
They don't
decide
make
the
it.
taste.
They don't make it.
No, listen. I know most France wine. I think is not Marisha.
Why should he use pasteurized?
Wait, kosher or non-kosher? Certified or non-certified wine? You're talking about the wine in the not kosher.
No, I'm talking about our kosher.
Our
wine.
kosher
yeah.
wine. Most, I wouldn't say most are not. There are plenty that are not, but there's still there are
Why
plenty
they
that are.
why?
Because it's all done for us. Kedem does 90% of the business, although there's a whole bunch of others. They do mavushal to satisfy us very often.
But no guy would pasteurize wine.
The reality is the problem is for the Yiddish companies.
He wants to ask you something.
30, 40, 50% of the business